Ever After is one of those films where the costumes really stay with you after you've watched it, and not a lot of people know why. It's not nostalgia, it's not fantasy. It's because the clothing is doing the storytelling before anyone speaks. In this video, I want to talk to you about the costume design in Ever After and why it's so believable and why it feels so different to other films. The costumes don't read as fantasy or dress ups. They feel like clothing that people actually lived in, and that's why they work. That comes down to one person, the costume designer, Jenny Beavan. Before you even hear Danielle speak for the first time, you've already gotten an impression of her from the clothes that she's wearing, the way her hair's styled, even her makeup or lack thereof. Before any character's even spoken, you're getting an impression of their status, their wealth, their beliefs, what they think of themselves and the position that they're in society. And that's all communicated through color, fabric, weight, adornment and embellishments, and hairstyling. Now, the costume designer Jenny Beavan is one of those costume designers that you've definitely seen her work before, just without realizing it. Her costume work spans period dramas, but also intense action films. And her ability to cater to that range tells you something really important about the way that she works and her style. Her strength isn't just about a specific era of clothes, it's actually about her ability to tell a story through those clothes. She grounds everything in a historical way, but just not in a museum type of way. It's more of like a lived-in garment that would have really existed had this person actually existed in history. Forever After, she uses Renaissance paintings as a foundation that informs the garments on the characters. It's not about fantasy illustrations or Gideon or these modern fabrics and modern techniques. It's about real visual language from the time. So the first understanding that we get of Danielle is what she is wearing. She wakes up beside the fireplace, covered in soot or cinders. Cinderella, the little cinder girl. She's wearing a simple linen chemise, an overdress, and an apron. Nothing decorative, nothing indulgent, nothing colourful. Linen is strong, it's durable, it's breathable, and it moves with the body. She's not wearing colour because colour was so difficult to dye into the fabric that obviously it cost a lot of time and money. So the fact that she's wearing those natural fibres and linen being such a durable fibre, and the fact that they're in neutral colours, earthy colours, that tells you so much about her situation already. She can't afford to wear bright colours. Fabric, there's no silk, it's linen, it's durable, it's hardworking, and her clothing is made to be worn day after day after day, and sometimes slept in. Now, compare what she's wearing with her stepfamily, her stepmother and her stepsisters. They're wearing heavier garments, darker colours, and in actual fact, dark colours like black were so difficult to be able to achieve. The thing with black is that you need all the colours to put into it and you need multiple dye bars. So in actual fact, black was one of the most expensive colours that you could wear. They're wearing more layers, lots of adornment, a lot of trinkets, jewelry, even hair ornaments as well. In that era, power and class were communicated through weight, restriction, and excess. And interestingly, that restriction of the clothing was symbolic of the fact that they literally couldn't do any physical labor in those garments. It would have been physically impossible because they were so constricted in their garments and laced up that really their main goal is to just sit there and look beautiful. This is also why the costumes never feel costumey. They aligned really closely with Renaissance paintings, where clothing really functioned as social language as it does in most eras. What you wore said who you were, how much power you had, how close you were to labor, and what you could afford or couldn't afford in Danielle's case. Costume isn't about decoration at all in this film. It's about rank and belief and identity. Now, I feel like the hair and the hairstyling in this movie is just incredible. And I'm definitely going to do a deep dive into the language of hair, especially in the Renaissance era. I think it's just so beautiful. But the same logic with the costumes also extends into hairstyling. And this is where it gets really interesting. Renaissance hairstyling was not at all casual. It was so intentional and deeply symbolic. Hair was one of the clearest visual markers of status, morality, and control. For women, how much hair that was visible really mattered in telling that story. Loose and softly curled hair, long hair, usually signaled youth, vulnerability, or lower status. Structured styles like braids, coiling, binding suggested discipline and maturity and social order. Braiding wasn't just practical, it referenced classical ideas of harmony and restraint, pulled from Greco-Roman imagery that Renaissance culture really admired. Metal embellishments, ribbons, and hair jewelry weren't just decorative either. They were actually portable wealth. They told you who could afford adornment and who couldn't. Hair was often shaped, bound, padded, and extended with false hair. It was actually constructed a lot more like architecture. And the goal wasn't effortlessness, it was control. So when you see Danielle's hair, it's significant that it stays simple and functional and often loose at the beginning of the film because it signifies her lower status, but also her youth and her vulnerability and the fact that she's working. She doesn't have the time to put her hair up. It just needs to be out of her face. But her stepfamily's hair, by contrast, is very controlled. It's elaborate. It includes a lot of metal embellishment and adornment to show that wealth. Even the classic Cinderella glass slippers follow that same logic. Now, these aren't the Disney fantasy shoes that you see in Cinderella made out of glass. These shoes are actually designed by Salvatore Ferragamo, and they're surprisingly restrained and accurate for that time. Only the heel is glass. The rest of the shoe is actually quite practical. Definitely wearable, definitely rooted in Renaissance design thinking. They looked magical, but they still feel wearable. That brand is grounded in Italian craftsmanship and respecting anatomy and inviting innovation. So in a really interesting way that also kind of like mirrors Da Vinci's design aesthetic. Salvatore Ferragamo was obsessed with how shoes function on real bodies, not just how beautiful they look, which actually made him the perfect collaborator for this film. And a lot of people mentioned this to me on the actual premiere night. Drew Barrymore wore a Salvatore Ferragamo dress, which was so beautiful. And that dress was actually all these beautiful hand-painted silk scarves that had all Renaissance paintings, such a beautiful color palette. Just thought it like mirrored the beauty of the costumes in the film, but did it in like a bit more of a modern way. So a lot of people love that dress as well. The key dress in this entire film, what most people call the Just Breathe dress and wings. In the film, the wings are designed by Leonardo da Vinci. I already spoke about this in my previous video, which was about da Vinci's role in the film replacing the kind of magic system that we see in fairy tale. You can watch that one so you can understand a bit better. But essentially the wings are designed in his aesthetic of how he designed his flying machines, but in a much more fragile, feminine way. The thing about this incredible dress that she wears, it's her dead mother's wedding dress and essentially Danielle's dowry. The interesting thing that I thought about when she was wearing this dress was what I noticed was that instantly it's silver. The entire dress is silver. You don't see anyone else wearing complete silver in this film. Everyone's wearing a lot of color, which obviously symbolized wealth because of, you know, the dye bars and the labor and process of that. And warmer tones like golds symbolize royalty and all that kind of stuff, but she's wearing silver. So I thought that was really interesting. And the instant thing that came to mind was armor. It felt like it was kind of arming herself in some sort of protective layer. That is symbolic of the fact that it's her mother's wedding dress. And even though her mother's not there, it's like her mother is protecting her in that moment. Do you know what I mean? It's actually so beautiful. It makes me kind of cry. It's actually so beautiful. This is the first time that she's truly believing in herself and coming to a public place where she needs that extra bit of strength and love and support. So she's putting on her mother's dress, almost like it's armor to protect herself. Oh, so beautiful. Ever After works and has worked for a long time now because it treats clothing and hair design as language. And that language transcends so many cultures because even though we all don't speak the same language, you can understand something before you hear someone speak. And so that visual language of hair and costume design is just transcendent over different cultures. Every fabric choice, every weight decision, every embellishment, every shoe, every piece of jewelry, they all communicate who these characters believe themselves to be. Jenny Beavan didn't design costumes, she designed lives. She designed clothes that were lived in by these characters, even though they weren't necessarily real, it felt real. And that's why these costumes stay with you long after you've watched the film. They're not spectacle, they're not shouting at you, they're telling you a complete story in themselves. They simply exist. And in doing so, it tells a story so clearly, so beautifully, in such a human way. If you want to see my visual carousel on my Instagram of the costume breakdown, I'll link that below so you can go and check that out. And if you want to watch my first thoughts that I had when I was watching the film, just me taking screenshots and processing it as I was watching it, you can check that out down below as well.